So welcome to North Texas Tableau User Group. My name is Joey. This is Jared. We also have Brandy and we have Tim, who are also on our committee here. We started this user group about 2018, and then Tim joined, Brandy joined, and Jared joined. So now we have a committee. We used to meet here pre-COVID. This is our first real in-person meeting since then, and hopefully we can start filling this up. So thank you for those that are online. Thank you for those who made it in person. And let's go ahead and get started. So again, we meet monthly. We're going to have presenters virtually, but going forward, we're going to try to meet in person. If you're comfortable, please come in person. Again, we come here basically just to share best practices, share experiences, also networking. It's a really good opportunity for individuals if your organization is hiring. This is the best source for new talent. If you guys are looking for a new position, you can either discreetly talk to us and we can put you in touch with some organizations that are hiring, or you can just announce, hey, I'm looking for a new job. I can say that in the past, I've helped, find a handful of people jobs here in Metroplex because they've approached me and said, hey, I'm looking for something new. So that's one thing we're really going to benefit from this user group. Also, again, we have the committee down here. I'm Joey. We have Tim online. I think Brandy has a meeting she's stuck in right now. And of course, we have Jared. My specialty is going to be mainly, on the data modeling. Design best practices is going to be Tim and Brandy, and then Jared's a whiz when it comes to Tableau prep. So if you guys ever need help with Tableau prep, this is the guy. He's actually also speaking at the conference. So if you guys are there in person, go to his session. If you guys are going to be online, please take a look at it. He's going to, what is it called? 100 days, Tableau prep in 100 days. So you guys definitely check that out. Okay, so let's see, this month's agenda. So yes, we always start with the welcome, the introductions. Okay, today we have Sam Epley. Sam, I have never met you before. If you want to go ahead and turn on your mic real quick.
Absolutely.
Hey, it's nice to meet you.
Likewise. It's great to meet you too, Joey.
Just a brief introduction of what you're going to speak about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about, do a little bit of an intro kind of as a part of my presentation. But I work up in the Twin Cities, up in Minneapolis, for a small consulting firm. The company I work with right now, Data Drive, they were just recently named the Tableau Rising Star Partner of the Year, and do a lot of work with Tableau Desktop and helping different organizations spin up self-service analytics. So I'm married, I've got 3 kids. I serve in the Minnesota Army National Guard, and I am kind of ridiculously involved in all things Tableau Public. So,
very cool. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time today to speak to our audience. It's always nice to get outside perspective from the, the community outside of our region here. And then after Sam's presentation, we're just going to have an open forum just to discuss, best practices when it comes to requirements gathering, because every organization is a little bit different. Tim and I were speaking earlier today, the way that they do stuff at Chase is going to be different than the way that another organization does on American Airlines or Southwest. So it's just going to be an open forum. Hopefully we can get together and just see what your experience is like on a day-to-day basis. And then if you guys are up for post-meeting, we definitely do, if you're in person, we do like to have a social hour. So, maybe grab a drink, 1 or 2 drinks from downstairs. Okay, so Sam, again, welcome, consultant from Indianapolis, Minnesota. So I'm assuming you're pretty, did you say you lead the user group up there, or you're just heavily involved?
I'm a co-leader for the Twin Cities Tableau user group, yes.
Is that the same one that, who else is on that committee?
Serena Roberts, Luke Comiskey, Luke Stanky, Katrina Johnson. I think Vince Rommel, I think Jim Van Sistine. I think that's pretty much everybody. I might be missing somebody and the recording will catch me. So
Yeah,
I think that's most of the folks.
yeah, so quick note on that. So the reason we have a committee now is because Serena and I got to have a discussion once, and she was like, yeah, you definitely need a committee because it's just too much for one person to do. So very cool. All right, so Tableau Public featured authors. So you guys can go out there and definitely look Sam up out there on Tableau Public and look at his portfolio. And then 3-time Tableau Public Visit of the Day, very cool. And then Tableau and Alteryx certified. I love Alteryx. Not to say Tableau Prep isn't getting there too, but definitely we love Alteryx. So, all right, I will go ahead and let you take it away, Sam.
All right, awesome. I'm going to share my screen here. Please let me know once you see it. Can you see my screen?
We got you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm thinking that the majority of the folks here are based out of or around northern Texas, obviously with that being the group. But welcome. I look forward to sharing a little bit about my dashboard design process, some of the lessons that I've learned over the course of the last several years of working in Tableau. And I'll share the link here a little bit. So a little bit about me. I kind of already touched on that a little bit. But as well as I'm going to go and provide an overview of my dashboard design process and kind of the thought process that I take anytime that I'm looking to develop or design something, and kind of taking some lessons learned from the several years I've been working in consulting. Then we're going to walk through an example of kind of what this process looked like for a Makeover Monday data set from 2019. As I was preparing this presentation, I wanted to go through the exercise completely from scratch. So I created this visualization that I'm going to show later on in preparation for this presentation. I wanted to make sure that it was something that was that it's something I'd never seen before and something I never interacted with. I didn't want to pull from my old work. So you guys are going to get an opportunity to see what this looks like in the process for this. So it's 2019's week 23, and it's the American Time Use Survey from the United States Department of Labor, Department of Labor Statistics. I'm going to list out some of my favorite Tableau resources for things that I've leveraged over the course of the last few years that have been really, really helpful and useful for me. And I can send this deck over to Joey and the rest of the committee in order to ensure that you have access to all of these. There's a bunch of links and helpful resources that you can use. And then we'll have some time carved out for Q&A. So a little bit about me. I already mentioned some of these things, but I live just west of Minneapolis in a suburb called Hopkins, Minnesota. I'm married. There's my wife, Jess, and 2 of my 3 kids. The third one was sleeping. And when you have I think she would have been about 4 or 5 months old by that point in time. When you've got a sleeping baby, you try not to wake them. That is a best practice. I'm an officer candidate in the Minnesota Army National Guard, basically on the path of becoming a commissioned officer in the United States Army. I've been working in consulting since 2016 and have been Tableau focused since March of 2020. Joey had alluded to this with the preview slide a little bit earlier, but I've been heavily involved over the course of the last 2 years in the Tableau community. I've got over 380 Tableau Public visualizations that are out there on my Tableau Public profile. In January, I think both Jared and I were featured as Tableau Public featured authors, and the brand new March 2022 class just got released with 10 amazing ladies. So I would encourage you to go find who those authors are, give them a follow, and engage with them because they're really, really incredible at what they do in terms of what they develop. I have been recognized as 3-time Visit of the Day by Tableau Public. I hold several different certifications with Tableau, the Certified Associate, Certified Professional, Certified Data Analyst, and then a consulting related partner one, the Certified Associate Consultant. And then I'm a regular participant in Workout Wednesday and Back to Biz Basics. And I've gotten featured too many times with all things Sports Biz Sunday. I love sports, so a ton of my visualizations are sports related. And then while Makeover Monday was actively managed by Andy and Eva, I was participating in that. And occasionally I go back and do one just for fun. But moving on to the dashboard design process that I have here, I'm going to just cover this at a very high level real quick right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each of the steps in a little bit more detail. So the first most important thing as a part of the process is understanding who your audience is, what are the types of questions that they care about, so that you can ensure that you're designing to their specific needs for how they're going to digest and use information. The second thing, gathering data that you can trust and that you can certify that it's correct, and any sort of deviations from that can be explained. It's important to have good data because garbage in, garbage out. Then the next step, once you know who your audience is and you've got data, exploring and identifying some insights or interesting things that you discover with the information. And as you're doing that, you're able to come up with different stories that can be told with respect to this data. So select the different chart types that are appropriate, that tell a clear and accurate story, which kind of goes into the next point of using data viz best practices to accurately display the facts. And I'll talk a little bit about specific chart types and things to use and maybe some things to not necessarily avoid, but to be careful or cautious around. Then once you've got data, you've got insights, you've got specific charts that you've designed well that leverage the best practices. Clearly, then what you do is you assemble these things on a dashboard. And then now that you have done all of that work and you have a dashboard that tells a very clear story, you can share it to the world. And I'll talk about both internal resources or external ways that you can communicate that out with your audience. So number one, understanding who your audience is. So the big thing to be considering here is who's going to be using your dashboard. Is this for an audience to just explore, or is this like a business related dashboard that they care about? It's an operational thing that they're in for multiple minutes or hours a day, where they're getting insights and information they need in order to do their job and make decisions. So you need to be thinking about what are the certain considerations that you need to be making or thinking about as you are developing this. So what type of interaction are you trying to inspire with your audience? Is this type of dashboard something that's going to be displayed on a TV or on a big monitor throughout the office over the course of the day? Is it needing to be updated? Just thinking about like what information is going to be communicated to your audience and what's the best way to encourage interaction and exploration, but taking into mind that if you're working with maybe a chief executive or someone in the C-suite or like a senior VP or a director, and they might not necessarily have the time to invest 30 minutes into the dashboard. They just need the quick hits, glance at it, and within 30 seconds, they know what's going on and they know who they need to talk to, that type of thing. So be thinking about who your audience is and what types of things do they need to know in order to take effective action. Another consideration to be thinking about is how are they going to be consuming this dashboard? So like I mentioned, with like if you have a monitor around the office, how do you go about ensuring that it's designed with the intended use in mind, and you understand who your user is, so you know how they intend to consume it. So I've worked at companies in the past where what they'll have a big monitor that they'll have a dashboard on, but at the same time, the executives first thing in the morning when they get up and they're on their phones, they jump straight to the interface, either that be Tableau Mobile or Power BI Mobile, and they're in a dashboard trying to get a glimpse on what's going on with the business. So think about, do they have a big monitor? I've got a 32-inch TV at my desk here, or are they on a laptop, a tablet, a mobile phone? Someday there's probably going to be a way to design these things for Apple Watches or different types of smart technology. So just be thinking about how your intended audience is going to be consuming this. So we understand who our audience is. Now we need to think about, okay, getting trusted sources of data. And in addition to having something that you can trust, that you can point to, that it's accurate, we need to also ensure that we can accurately and cleanly communicate what each of the different columns in the data means, or if at like a row level, make sure that there's no confusion about what a specific record means. I know in working with some clients in the financial services sector or in manufacturing, where you have like an invoice ID, then you have like sub-invoice line items. So making sure that all of those things in context make sense So understanding your data is really, really important. That way you can explain any nuances or weird things that you discover, or if there's like a code that signals that something should be negated, but all of the values are positive, then you know that you have to go in and create a calculation to tweak that. So make sure that you understand how to effectively take the data that you can trust, that you can work with. Make sure that you understand how to accurately report from that data, and make sure that you're citing your sources. So when it comes down to pretty much all of the Tableau Public business that I'm doing, I'm citing a source. So a lot of the stuff I pull is from like Sports Reference or like ESPN or 538. So in a business context, it's important to also communicate where you're getting your data from, because the whole concept of a single source of truth. When it comes to that, a lot of businesses, one of the challenges that they face is that you've got like 2 or 3 or 4 different ways of getting at the same data. And what that can lead to is confusion around, well, I'm excluding these items and I'm keeping these ones for X, Y, and Z reasons. And there's a disagreement in terms of numbers. If you can communicate and cite exactly the tweaks or changes that you made to the data in order to get it to a single reporting standard, that way, if someone's like, well, what did you do? You can point directly to it and you can explain that, whether that be like a collapsible container that tells more about your data, or a hover over little icon that explains the specific steps that were taken. If you can do that, that encourages additional confidence in the data, because you're providing transparency and you're providing insight into where this data came from. So next, so we've got data that we can trust. We know how to work with it. Now what we're doing is we're identifying insights. So there's a couple of different things that we might be looking for as we're exploring our data. Trends. So whether that be like a trend line over time, or is there seasonality? If you've ever interacted with Superstore, one of the packaged data sets that comes with Tableau Desktop, one thing you'll realize is that there is seasonality to the sales pattern, where Q4, October, November, December, sales are really high. Q2, April, May, and June, sales are much lower. So there's a pattern and there's a seasonality to things. So I'm trying to identify those trends, because those could be valuable pieces of information. A book recommendation that I don't have listed in here, but Nate Silver's The Signal and the Noise. He's the founder of 538, and he's got a lot of really interesting things about understanding, are the information that you're describing, are you talking about just kind of the normal cost of doing business, or is this like something's going on and we need to actually draw attention to this? So be thinking about, as you're identifying insights, what is significant and what is not. So in addition to trends, thinking about patterns or correlations. So if you've got like sales and profit and you're doing it at a product level, are there certain products that we sell a lot of, but we're losing a lot of money, or there's a lot of missed opportunity for us to earn money as a company? So be thinking about, are there certain correlations to this? Is it always, the more we sell, the more profit we get? The more we sell, does profit ratio go down? So think about relationships when it comes to that. Values by dimension groups. So in Superstore, you've got different products, you've got different customer segments. So you've got consumer, you've got home office, and you've got, there's one more, corporate. And then in addition to that, with regions, you've got Northeast, South, and West. And with product categories, you've got furniture, you've got office supplies, you've got technology. So you've got these different dimensional buckets or groups that there could be differences in. And it's important to explore these and to try and identify, is there a story that can be told with this that allows us to have a better understanding of our situation and the work that we're doing and the decisions that we're trying to make on a daily basis. And then lastly, anomalies or outliers. And this kind of goes to the last point of ensuring that you have trustworthy data. If you have a really significant outlier, and actually Eric Balash's Back to Biz Basics, it was either week 5 or 6, dealing with outliers, ensuring that, are the values really truly accurate, and do they represent the reality of what's going on? Because if they do represent reality, then that could be an important thing to call out. And if it's not accurate, then you can say, we need to correct for this, either tweak the data itself or work with your data partners or data engineers to ensure that it can be properly reported. So that's kind of the things I'm thinking about as I'm looking to identify insights. Next, I'm thinking about the different charts that I'm choosing and trying to make sure that I select the right type of chart that most accurately or effectively communicates the data that I'm trying to display. So if we're looking at like the values by dimension, so with like product category or segment, or the different types of dimensional groups, leveraging a bar chart. A bar chart, it's simple. It might be a little bit old school, but it communicates using the encoding factor of length, and it's something that our brains can see, and we get it and we understand it. Tree maps are also another way that you can communicate dimensional values. The caveat here is if you have like a value like profit and you have negative profits, tree maps don't really do a good job of communicating negative values. So be conscientious of what your data includes so that you're not misrepresenting the data. When it comes to values over time, you can use a bar chart where your year or your month or quarter can be on like the categorical axis as a discrete object in Tableau. And you could have a bar chart, or you could have a line chart, or an area chart. Or if, for instance, you work in construction management, well, a roommate I had from college, he worked in construction, and Gantt charts are something that's really used quite a bit because you're able to see different stages of a project over time, and you're able to see what are the prerequisites or the other dependencies that could influence other stages of things. So leveraging different types of charts to communicate time. When it comes to geographical data, maps, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this in Tableau, whether that be the standard mapping tools that come with Tableau, which could be either a filled map or a circle map, or you could also do some custom mapping with polygons or with shapes, like a hex map, for instance. Comparison charts. A bullet chart is a great way of describing progress towards a goal or a comparison against a prior period. So if you aren't familiar with a bullet chart, I'd encourage you to search it up on Google and get a little bit of insight into how that communicates data clearly. Distribution of values. We're going to be doing a little bit with this today with the time use survey information. So histograms, box and whisker plots, and density plots as well, to be able to show where are the values concentrated in a certain area, or is it a normal distribution. And then proportion of total. So I like to call bar, pie, and donut charts. I kind of like to call those baked good charts. I'm a fan of both bars, pies, and donuts, but be thinking about the way that you're communicating this data. And if you have a bunch of different dimensional values, so like in Superstore, or if you base it off a product name and you're trying to show like sales by product, as soon as you exceed about 5 values with a pie or a donut chart, it gets really hard for the end user to consume it. So be thoughtful about if you're trying to represent a proportion of total, what that actually will look like. So we've got the right charts selected for our data that we want to communicate. Now what we need to make sure we're doing is we need to make sure we're not misleading our user. So an example of this is like, so I have no idea how tall my 9-month-old daughter is because she's not really standing up yet, but like I'm just about 6 foot, my wife's about 5'6". My oldest son, he's maybe like 3'6". My our middle child, he's maybe like 3 feet tall. If you were to put a bar chart with an axis starting at 0, you'd be able to see that, okay, I'm the tallest, my wife is next, then my oldest son, and then my middle child. What if I were to start that height axis at 2 feet 9 inches? My middle child would look very, very small, and then my wife and I would look like giants. So be thinking about the way that you're communicating, specifically with like a bar chart. Make sure that you're not misrepresenting your data by not having the axis at 0. I find very few use cases where having a bar chart not start at 0, and it also applies to area charts because you're encoding it based off of length. If you're encoding it based off of length, that could be something that hangs people up, where they see a chart and they're like, oh man, Sam is really, really tall and his kids are really, really short. And it's like, it's not telling an accurate story. So another way that data could be potentially misrepresented, a really good book by Alberto Cairo is How Charts Lie. I would recommend that one as well. If you were to just like reverse an axis and not communicate it, and you don't have a label telling the user that, oh, when ice cream sales go up, shark attacks go down. Like if you think about different ways that variables could relate, that could lead to a misleading conclusion. So leverage pre-attentive attributes to ensure that you're drawing attention to insights and then Gestalt principles. So the laws of human perception in terms of how when we see things, our body and our mind either groups them or sees them as different. So be thinking about those. Some examples of these principles are with respect to like color, you've got hue, you've got intensity. With respect to like different mark components, you can have size, you can have proximity. There's a bunch of different enclosure. There's a bunch of different ways. I know that Makeover Monday, the book by Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray, has a good section about pre-attentive attributes and Gestalt principles. And then I think Cole Nussbaumer and Affleck's Storytelling with Data also gets into that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I've got that monitored as well. But make sure you're using best practices. Next up, you've got really well-designed charts that kind of honor and respect best practices. Now we need to assemble them on a dashboard. So consider padding and space. And one thing that can make a dashboard hard to consume is if you've got a million things crammed onto there, and it's hard to read, and you don't know where your eyes got to go. So be thinking about if and this is something that will come with user testing. If you just kind of hand over a dashboard to an end user and just say, find this for me, and have them like speak aloud their user experience, you can learn lessons about like, I don't know what's going on there. So be thinking about that as you're designing and arranging things in your dashboard. Give things space to breathe, and provide context either with text or color, different ways that if you're using pre-attentive attributes effectively, that you can communicate specific insights or call them out. Depending on the use case and the functionality that your end user needs, consider adding some interactivity, whether that be via actions, whether that's action filters or parameter actions or highlight actions. Think about different ways that you can encourage interactivity if the use case justifies it. And then a user path that I like to kind of think through is in a dashboard, you're trying to get a general sense first and foremost of what's happening, what's going on, situational awareness. And then once you know that something is different or weird or not as it needs to be, then you can start to kind of diagnose and figure out, okay, why is this happening or where is this happening? And then you can kind of go down a rabbit trail in a way of identifying more details about a specific problem, so that if you've identified a more specific problem, the biggest next step is how can I take action and how can I make an impact towards resolving this goal? So you have to have a call to action. So then the last part of this is sharing your work. And with Tableau Public, it's a free platform. If you don't have a Tableau Public profile and you're just new to Tableau, or you're a seasoned pro and you just don't happen to have it, I'd encourage you to get one and to get involved in the community, because it's a fantastic place to learn, grow, interact with others who love these tools and who are willing to learn and share and teach. So I would encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to do that. But think about who your audience is. So like if I'm developing a dashboard for a client of mine, most likely it's going to be an internal dashboard where it's business operations or research and development, or it's information that they wouldn't want to have shared externally outside of the company. So with that, depending on the way that the company has arranged their Tableau platform, most companies either go Tableau Server or Tableau Online. Tableau Server is self-hosted. Tableau Online is actually hosted by Tableau. And it's basically an online interface that people can interact with and see and consume data visualization. If this is something that is external or potentially public facing, where you don't necessarily want to have user authentication involved, and you're okay with this data because it's public data, you're okay with it being out there kind of in the wild. With that, consider publishing it to Tableau Public. There's more than 2 million authors around the world. There's hundreds of thousands of visualizations, and it's a great place to see the different types of stories that people can tell with data. So the example that we're going to walk through here, and I've already got it pulled up on my screen here, but it's Makeover Monday 2019, week 23, and this comes from the American Time Use Survey from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS. And what we have as a part of the data source is we have the average number of hours of sleep per day based off of the year based off of the age of the person, based off of the sex of the person. So I think that they've got it men and women is how they have it broken out. And then the type of day. So is it a non-holiday weekday, so a standard normal weekday, or is it a holiday / weekend? So that's the data that we're going to be looking at, and this is the chart that we're going to be revising. One thing that I want to call out in specific with respect to best practices is they violated the cardinal rule of bar charts by starting the vertical axis, starting it at 7 instead of 0, because that gives the impression that these values are really, really high and these ones are really, really low. And you can see that, this blue bar here, this 9.8, it looks like it's twice as big as this blue bar here, which is 8.2. So it's like, if the lower one is 8.2 and the other one looks double the size, you might think, oh, it must be 16. But that's how you can potentially mislead people with data. So that's one thing that I want to call out there. But let's be like Buddy the Elf and let's jump across the little white lines and jump in. So let me show what the published dashboard looks like. So what I have here, I've got a very clear description, a title, and I call some color here for the initial selection, and then a description about, what is the context, what's going on with this data, are there certain things? So like, for instance, those over the age of 65, they're the most consistent sleepers. They average anywhere between 8.6 and 9.3 hours of sleep a night, but all other age groups have a much wider variation. And if you think about that, that might make sense when we get to actually exploring some of the exploration charts. So, all right. So when it comes to the different types of charts here, this is a version of a line chart called a slope chart. And then we have a histogram of buckets, basically, of hours of sleep. It's going to refresh real quick. But with this, we can see the proportion overall of the population that satisfies that criteria or that range of sleep. And then based off of the selection here, so this is the group of 65 and over, the percentage of total value here of 45, it's basically saying what percentage of that cohort is it fits into that band. So 19% overall of the people who are surveyed across all of the different years and measurement periods, they slept between 8 3/4 and 9 hours of sleep. But then if you look at the specific cohort of 65 and older, 45%. So it's overrepresented there. Get that much sleep. So, and then this goes all the way up to almost 11 hours of sleep. So with this, there's interactivity that's encouraged. So we can look at everybody and there's nothing selected there. If we look at, for instance, weekends and holidays, we would expect to see much more sleep taking place, which is exactly what we see. So let's jump into this and some of the different little tools that I leveraged in order to come up with these insights. So I broke it down by kind of each of the different variables in order to try and explore that. So I figured, okay, well, this is each of the different cohorts. Interesting. What is going on here over time? And we have a range of 2003 to 2017. And do we really see anything noticeable year to year? There's, maybe quarter to a half hour shifts that take place, but it's, for the most part, everything's pretty much level at this level, at least. What about if we break it out by the type of day? What we see, and this makes sense, is that weekends and holidays, as we saw on the histogram, more sleep. Non-holiday weekdays, less sleep. Makes sense. And then the cohort that I've got selected right now is 65 and over. So what we see is that they're very consistent in terms of how many hours of sleep they get. So then what if it's broken down by sex? So men versus women, not a humongous difference there. What about by age group? So this is what we see here is these are all of the non-holiday weekdays for these cohorts are kind of in this left side. And then on this right side, these are all of the weekends. And this kind of makes sense because when you're 15 to 24, you might be in college. You might have a part-time job, maybe a full-time job, or you're just getting started. But if you think about the things that would get in the way potentially of you getting a lot of sleep, what are some of those things? You probably don't have kids. This group, they might not necessarily have the same type of responsibilities that someone in their 40s would have. So think about, does this make logical sense and is this worthwhile to communicate? What if we, this is similar to the line chart, but it's using this kind of jittered bubble plot. What about by year? Not a humongous difference. So then we have our histogram, and basically this is showing the distribution of hours of sleep based on these cohorts. And then this is that slope chart that I talked about earlier, where we basically exclude all of the values except for the min and the max. And what that allows us to do is when we assemble it on this dashboard, we've got a little bit of space, we've got a little bit of call to color. What this allows us to do is to clearly see based off of the descriptions we put down here, we know what's going on and it encourages exploration. And this is just like what we had just seen. So like men and women, if we just do men here, men maybe get a little bit less sleep overall, but it's fairly equally distributed across. And all of these encourage interaction here. And then also using tooltips in Tableau, for instance. So these can provide additional context if you don't necessarily have space to call it out. So, but that is for all means and purposes, and then publishing this, so server, publish workbook, publish the Tableau. So that's basically what the example looks like. I want to talk quickly about some of the resources that I've found to be incredibly helpful and useful. Tableau's e-learning is fantastic, and if you're new to Tableau, it's comparatively very inexpensive. It's self-directed learning, asynchronous, but I go for it. It is an awesome way to learn, an awesome way to grow. The Tableau knowledge base, Tableau has a lot of really good documentation, and their community forums are really, really helpful. If you get lost or stuck or running into a weird little bug, you're able to get feedback around how to potentially resolve it. Getting plugged into a local Tableau user group, which I don't know if for everyone here on the call, it's local. I figure for the people in person, it probably is, but maybe there's folks from around the United States or around the world who are jumping into this call today. So get plugged in. I've got links to I think there's about 80 user groups that are active in North America. So get plugged into those. If you have the opportunity to attend Tableau conference in person, I'm fairly confident that tickets are still available at the time I'm saying this. It's in Las Vegas, I think May 17th through the 19th. It's awesome that Jared's going to be presenting. So if you have the opportunity to go, I'd encourage it. If you don't have the opportunity to go, you can't get away, or the financial cost of the tickets or travel or hotel or whatever doesn't work, you can also attend virtually, which is a great way to be able to plug into so many different sessions and learn a lot about Tableau, the community, and the different types of things you can do with that. Follow Tableau Visionaries, which are formerly known as Zen Masters. Follow them on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and then follow the hashtag DataFam on Twitter. That's, as far as I've been able to tell over the last 2 years, that's almost exclusively a Tableau-related hashtag. So if you're looking for vision inspiration, or you want to get in touch with people who are active in the community, that's a great way to find them. In the upper right-hand corner over here, thinking about Tableau Public Community Challenges. I'm super active with Workout Wednesday, and basically that's a technical challenge that stretches your understanding of how to use the tool. I would say that this is single-handedly the thing that's allowed me to be as effective with Tableau because I've worked out probably 200 some odd problems over the course of all of these challenges. I've got a lot of exposure to different ways that we can work with things. So it's allowed me to be incredibly effective in my job. Back to Viz Basics, that's run by Eric Balash. And basically it's like, I think the first one back in like November or December was build a bar chart where they provide you with a data set. It's kind of like Makeover Monday, but there's a specific task in mind. So for those who are just getting started, I would encourage you to dive into that. It's a great way to practice a specific skill and get to a specific outcome. Sports Viz Sunday, there's data sets that are published every month. And this data can be any different kind of sports, whether that's tennis or basketball or like NFL salary stuff. I know there was one a couple of months ago, but it's all sports related visualizations. And every week they do a feature of sports vizzes that have been published that the leaders that challenge think are really cool. And they want to share that and give exposure to those. Makeover Monday, it's no longer actively run, but there's probably about 300 some odd data sources that exist out there, a lot of them on Data World. And it's a great way to test your design chops. And you basically get a data set that's kind of been pre-crafted, kind of like what we had here with the time use survey. And what we're able to do with that is we have an opportunity to say, okay, well, how am I going to tell the story with this data using different effective chart types? So it's a great way if you're trying to get practice to learn and grow. So a couple of these books I already mentioned, but if you're looking to read about Tableau or data visualization, Storytelling with Data by Cole, Nussbaum, and Affleck, that one is not Tableau specific, but it is really, really helpful to understanding how to tell stories very clearly and cleanly. So highly recommend that book. Big Book of Dashboards by Steve Wexler, Jeff Schaefer, and Andy Cottegrieve. I think they had just published this book 5 years ago, like this week. And it is a book full of different examples of different kinds of dashboards, different types of industries, and different types of stories that people are trying to tell. And it's it does a really good job of explaining different ways to communicate with the data that they have. So I'd encourage you, if you have an opportunity to either get that book or to read it from your local library, I'd encourage you to do that. Makeover Monday, I mentioned this from Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray. Very similar to Storytelling with Data, but also Big Book of Dashboards. There's a lot of really cool visualizations in there, and they use a lot of really helpful practical examples for learning the skill of telling stories with data, basically. And then 2 books by Ryan Sleeper here, Practical Tableau and Innovative Tableau. Practical Tableau, both of these books have 100 examples of things that you can do in Tableau that can help accelerate your development and your understanding of how do we do cool little things. If you're starting and you're trying to decide between the 2 books, I would recommend Practical Tableau. There's the first one that was written, and it's kind of like a 100 level course. Innovative Tableau, that's kind of an intermediate level type of book, kind of a 200 level deal. But with that being said, anybody got any questions? I don't see any in the chat right now, but if there's any, I would love to hear them and would love to take a stab at being able to answer them for you.
Anybody with a question in the audience? You know, I do have a question. Sam, can you go back to your slide that you had your design process laid out? I think
Yes.
6 or 7 steps.
Yep.
So guys, you know, let's sort of talk about this, because I know the next part of our agenda here is to have an open forum about design process and what your experience is like in organizations. One thing that I had a question, you know, specifically for you, Sam, if you can hear me. So, and I know you provided some really good resources towards the end there, some good books. What's your go-to for the middle section there where it says select chart types that tell a clear story? Like I use the visual vocabulary a lot that's out there on Tableau Public. That's sort of my go-to.
Yep.
If you guys aren't familiar with that, then definitely go out there to Tableau Public and search visual vocabulary. It's got hundreds of thousands of views. That's my go-to. Sam, is there something in particular?
I know that resource exists, and I think also Adam McCann has like the 5 different levels of dashboards. That's been one that I've probably very earlier on in my development as a Tableau developer, I would have gone to those. With the 2 years of really in the weeds Tableau experience, I think I've just kind of, I've read enough books to kind of understand what the best practices are. So I don't have a resource that I will typically jump to try and figure out what's the most effective way to encode data in a way that's very clear and concise. But I think that those, Andy Kriebel's visual, is like a visual dictionary or visual vocabulary, something like that. That's a great one. I think it just surpassed 3 million views, actually. It's ridiculous. And I think Andy had just made it downloadable again. Don't publish it because it is all the work that he had done. But I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to get a copy of that or at least view it online. So that's a good resource. Makeover Monday and Storytelling with Data. Those would probably be 2 books that I would recommend if you're trying to identify what's the right chart type for the story I'm trying to tell. Those would probably be it.
Very cool. I don't know if you guys in the audience or anyone online has a recommendation for a go-to for, you know, you've got a pretty good understanding of what the end user wants. You've got a good understanding of your audience. You know, is there a resource that maybe we don't know about that you guys want to introduce to us that, hey, this is my go-to to determine, you know, what this is maybe best for this type of dashboard?
Are you more at getting to kind of like the fifth step here, talking about best practices, or are you more talking about the first point about understanding what's going to resonate with your audience?
No, I'm already, yeah, down probably in step 4 and 5 there, right?
Okay.
Trying to determine which charts best, best are for this type of dashboard, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you've recommended a few resources. My go-to is visual vocabulary. I was just asking the audience if there was another book or anything that you guys recommend. I don't know, Jared, do you have anything? What's your go-to?
For mine, to sort of determine what we should do best to get to that step of how do I even know what kind of chart type to narrow it down to. I tend to use the 5 whys method to try and understand, okay, we want a dashboard around revenue, or why? Why do we want to see revenue? What is that going to drive? To really get down to what are they actually looking for? Like, we can analyze revenue in so many different ways. And so using that 5 whys method then helps me get to the process of, now that I know what we're looking for and why we're looking for it and what we're going to do with it, now I can sort of understand, based on the answers they gave me, they're trying to do some type of correlation analysis. I can pull up the visual vocabulary, for example, and look at the correlation charts and go from there. Another thing that, I think this layout of the design process going from, 1 to done is great. And one thing that we've done that's changed my process is actually starting at the end, beginning with the end in mind, and trying to understand, okay, we give you a product, your dashboard, what does that look like? If we could give you the world, what does that look like? And then work backwards from there, because that will give you a better understanding of your audience starting from the end, because they'll start to tell you, well, we want something that kind of looks like this, and we wish we could do this with it. And that can start your process at the beginning with a much more clear set to drive the rest of that. But
would you consider that wireframing?
a little bit, yeah. I mean, because it can work for anything. It can work for the dashboard design process. It can even work for the data process. Like your finished data product, what does that look like? And we can take that and work from the beginning, work backwards from there, because now we know what your definition of success is.
Yep.
100% agree with everything Jared just said. I've had the opportunity over the course of the past couple of years to see dashboarding or wireframing or whiteboarding, I guess you could say it, seeing it done very, very well. And at the same time, also seeing it done very poorly too. So to Jared's point, I think it's really vitally important to understand who is your user and how do they intend, like what are the decisions that they go to this dashboard and what are they trying to be able to do with it? Like, because a dashboard is just a resource to get information, ideally as quickly as possible, so that you can do what. And if you have a good, thorough conversation, a bunch of questions to try and be really, really clear in terms of understanding what are the decisions that your client or your end consumer need to be thinking about. How do those tie back to the specific visualizations that you'll select that will enable you to communicate that data very, very clearly. So I see we do have a few questions in the chat here.
Yeah, go ahead. You're sharing your screen. You want to scroll up to the first one there?
Sure. So the first question.
Or is that me? Oh, that's me.
Sorry. Actually, they're viewing my screen here.
Oh, okay.
Scroll up a little bit. So yeah, so the first question here is from Vinny.
Mhm.
If you had to start your career over again, what kind of job would give most exposure to grow as a data viz professional? Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know, Jared, Sam, do you have anything here you'd like to start with?
Yeah. When it comes to like the career growth that I've been able to have over the course of the last 2 years, I'd say that uh, if you're able to find a role where you're able to interact with the tool, um, and I would encourage almost a consulting type of role, or if it's in like an internal consulting type of role where you get exposure to different teams and different ways of thinking. And different specific like deliverables or data that you're going to be working with, I think that that would probably provide you with the greatest opportunity to get as much I call it width, as much exposure to different types of industries. And so that I would encourage a role that allows you to do that. And the last 2 years of development and growth that I've been in, and the success I've been able to have, I'd say that probably 95% of that has all kind of come on my own time. So I think about what are the things that matter to you in terms of a job, in terms of like career progression. Think about those things and then evaluate, how much outside of that do I want to do, whether that be for fun. Like data viz is my hobby. That's my number one hobby when I'm not playing with my kids or hanging out with my wife. So is that helpful, Vinny?
No, yeah, it's very helpful. I would have to say for me, I started back then we didn't call them data engineers, but I started writing a bunch of SQL. That's how I started. And then, so, I would encourage, if you're trying to start your career over again, I know it's not necessarily data viz oriented, but a lot of building a data viz is making sure you have quality data, you have a very well structured data set, data source. So, I would say that if you're starting your career over and you want to eventually get into data viz, start as a data engineer. Understand how you can, work with data, create your own data sets, blend the data, structure your data the proper way for in order for it to fit a viz the right way. So, and I know data engineering right now, they're very hot commodity right now. They're very high needs, so I would probably say start there.
Jared, how did you learn? Or
Yeah, for me, it's my answer is probably not helpful, but it's difficult. It's complicated because my exposure to data was actually in a warehouse. My career started packing and shipping, receiving data center equipment, and seeing that there was a need to automate that process. And so that is where I kind of started learning VBA with Excel, because that was the main thing we were using. And then when that turned into, well, how do we take this process and start to scale it globally with no investment? That's when I started using Access and building out an inventory tool in Access. And that's how I started learning SQL. And so using VBA to power SQL statements and turn that into something that would then spit out back-end reports that we could start visualizing how our audit's doing, what does our losses look like, how are technicians performing globally. That was my entry into what I do today. And that was a warehouse job. So I don't know if there is a specific place to start to get exposure to data. It's everywhere now. So I know that's not super helpful, but it's it's not a it's changed so much. The landscape has changed so much that you really can't get exposure to this career. Almost anything.
Yep. Anybody in the audience have any recommendations?
I think if somebody's starting and they're looking at Tableau, I think they would be great to Jared right back from this is the prep, the starting the prep, because you need somebody can see them all, but you can use prep to do so much to understand the data and really a lot of people, we all know the data is messy, right? You have to connect it, Tableau. I would say start the prep.
I don't know if you guys on the call heard that. The recommendation was, going back to data engineering.
Not so much SQL based, but just, learning how to use prep, right? Tableau prep, and then, which will then help you understand, how to work with data and structure your data, work with joins and do data building and so forth. Good recommendation. Anybody else in the audience? Anybody online have a recommendation? Hopefully, Vinny, we gave you some good ideas there. All right, so the next question is from Christine. Is gathering business requirements the same as gather data in your dashboard design process? So Sam, I would say it's a question for you.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you're sharing my screen there, but get back to this. So for me, a lot of understanding the business requirements probably are in the first two steps. Because I think it was Jared who had said that, ensuring that you're, Jared said something like 5 minutes ago that I thought was really profound, then I forgot it. Shoot. But if you can understand, like starting with the end in mind, if you can start there with being able to communicate with who is the end user of this product, and how are you going to use it, that all goes into understanding who your audience is. So I'd say that the data piece is a part of the requirements gathering, but I'd say that what's probably more important is understanding with a dashboard that you're trying to develop, how is it going to be used? Who's it going to be used by? What types of decisions need to be made? Here, being able to consider a user path and think through, if they're trying to answer specific questions, like to Jared's point about revenue, it's like, well, why is revenue up? And what is the cause for why it's up or why it's down? Being able to get to those specific points, I think that's in understanding what's important to your end user. Because I can build a really cool looking dashboard and it flows really cool. It's got a lot of interactivity, but if it's not something that the end user is going to feel like they've had buy-in into, or it doesn't answer their questions, they're not going to modify their business practices because it's just another tool that they didn't have any buy-in. So I think understanding the audience is paramount, and who's going to consume a dashboard. I think that matters most. And then as a part of the requirements gathering, then ensuring that you have the right data that is going to inform the insights that they care about. I'd say that's probably what's the way that I would order those. Does that answer your question, Christine? Okay.
Let's see, yes, that helps. All right, perfect. Okay, anybody else have any more questions regarding this process? Yes.
Thank you. From learning from consulting, and I know in your presentation, you talked about use of using like padding and spacing and making it to where a user can quickly in 30 seconds or less determine their answers. What are some things that maybe you did towards the beginning of your consulting that you learned up until now that people who are less familiar with, like your users who are less familiar with Tableau, didn't quite maybe understand compared to us who are a little bit more used to visualizations and digesting Tableau information?
Yeah, Sam, could you hear that?
I heard about half of it. I was trying really hard. Can you summarize?
Yeah, so in your process, you talked about padding and spacing, doing certain design elements, things that will help you get to the information faster and also, are more appealing in a cognitive sense. But in the world of consulting, what did you do maybe early on that you have found maybe doesn't translate so well because you're end user might not be as familiar with Tableau as we are?
Sure. It's a really good question. I think it's a challenging one to answer because each end user is going to be different in terms of their preferences, in terms of their background. I think there's a book by Robin Williams called A Non-Designer's Handbook or Guidebook or something. I'd recommend that because it talks a lot about being able to design not necessarily charts cleanly or effectively, but being able to develop visually appealing things and what are different characteristics that make things visually appealing. But a lot of the companies that I've worked with over the past 5-6 years that I've been in consulting, a lot of folks are coming out of the Excel world, which Microsoft Excel is an incredibly powerful tool and it does a lot of really awesome things. But one of the things that it doesn't do great is data visualization. And if you have this table with a bajillion columns and a bajillion rows, it's hard to glean insights from that. So a lot of clients that I interact with, they'll talk about how I just want a table because my table tells me what I need to know. And there is a little bit of give and take in consulting where a table might give them exactly what they want, but at the same time, it might not necessarily be a best practice. So that's something on a situational basis where if you're able to communicate, actually, I'm gonna do a live demo here. Let me jump to my Tableau Public. I know exactly what I'm looking for. And I know approximately when I did it. Stand by. It was pre-attentive attributes. Here we go. So the value of pre-attentive attributes. This is Major League Baseball standings as of like September 16th of last year. Thinking about like what are different ways that you can specifically call out and draw attention to specific things. Being able to, if you just provide them with a text table is fine, but you have to almost scan every single cell in order to know what's going on. Highlight, with a highlight table, you're able to see the high values, the low values very, very quickly. So for a user where they may not necessarily know what they need to see, that's where I think relying on best practices can ensure that you have, the greatest likelihood that the message will be conveyed clearly to your audience. Does that answer your question?
And one thing I can say too, I'm really new to the consulting world. I've been doing it for about 2 months. And one thing that I found pretty immediately was there's been a lot more popularity using outside tools to sort of enhance the design of your dashboards, make them pop, give them a modern touch. And that can be really successful in terms of you can give them beautiful dashboards, but then it can also be unsuccessful in, what does the relationship with your client look like? Is this going to be a long-term thing where you're continuously working with them, maintaining the dashboard and changes, and so you and your team, y'all understand the changes that you need to make. Maybe it's you're using Figma or Illustrator, PowerPoint to add the elements, and so what you need to change to keep the design flowing. But if it's something like it's a 6-week project with the client and then you're going to roll off and you've added all these outside elements, and so now if they want to update it, they've got to go and learn this tool, or there's going to be stuff that looks out of place. So when it comes to things like that and trying to give it that sort of modern UX UI feel, just be careful with who's going to maintain it afterwards, and do they understand what they need to do to keep those elements in place.
I've got something that I want to show here. One thing that I'll do for some of my clients is I will provide them with, so these are for some internal just dummy dashboards that I do for Data Drive. But basically, like, if we were to like build a case study, for instance, around, can you guys see my screen in Figma?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Like something that I'll do is like if we know that we're going to hand off a dashboard, one dashboard, and we want to provide and equip our the stakeholder at the client, we want to provide them with flexibility and different things that they can use. What I'll do is I'll actually build out a bunch of different examples of wireframes that they can then use in order to ensure that they're not missing out on oh well, we want to, instead of us having like another thing I've started to do for example with this one is, let's say that we don't know how many KPIs we're going to need. One thing I'll do is I'll just make one single box that will hold all the KPIs. So you can have 4 KPIs in here with a little more vertical spacing. You can have 5, you can have 6, you might be able to stretch 7. So one of the things that I'll do with some of my clients, if they want to have a more modern UX, and I'll actually pre-build, there's one that I just did where I built them 49 different dashboard template backgrounds. It doesn't take very long to do it. You just have different options and permutations for where things sit on the dashboard. But it equips them so that, okay, we do need a filters bar and we need to have 2 charts across the top and 1 table across the bottom. We're done. And they can pull that directly and import that as a dashboard background. So that's one thing that I've done that's been, I think, really, really helpful for some of my clients where they have the resources then where it's not just, it's only this one way. And if you want to tweak it, you're in a not so optimal situation. It's one thing I've done to kind of alleviate that.
Yeah, so are you guys familiar with the tool that he was showing right there? Okay, yeah, Sam. So
Can you go back real quick, Sam?
Yep.
And show your
I can go back.
screen
Yeah, so
real
this is
quick?
Figma.
So guys, when we talk about wireframing, this is a tool that helps developers wireframe apps and dashboards, right? It's called Figma. So Sam, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm going to show the one that I just did for, so the most recent Back to Biz Basics week 7 that released like a week and a half ago. Oh, hey, look, there's Jared. Basically, the challenge was build out a wireframe. And, based off of a set of requirements, it's actually a really, really great exercise where, I'll actually, I mean, if you want me to, I can send the link in the chat here afterwards, but basically they give you a specific, type of metrics that you need to visualize. And then they want to be able to see something over time, and they want to see details by booking site and like the selected metric by type of room or geographically. So like this is all done in Figma. And I was talking with someone earlier today. I'm actually building out a data set that's completely randomized, and it's like 6 years worth of data and like 30 million hotel reservations that I'm actually going to be publishing to my Tableau Public here probably within the next 48 hours. That's taking this type of wireframe and actually converting it into a functional usable dashboard. And like, here's an example of like what a table could look like. And this is just for the sake of, all of this is dummy fake data, but being able to show different insights and different metrics and values and whatnot. Does anyone have any specific questions about Figma or just like the concept of wireframing?
Yeah, I don't think the audience here, I think this could be their first time to ever, maybe the first time they've heard, the word Figma. So can you give just a brief overview of, how people use it, designers use it?
Mm-hmm. I have a recommendation for a Tableau user group to watch. The Twin Cities Tableau user group, probably 9 or so months ago, 10 months ago, Robert Crocker and I don't know if it's like Nathan Sabatini, they did a collaborative Figma design talk at the Twin Cities user group. I think it was like last June. I can send that link over to Jared and Tim here after we wrap up here. But I'm pretty sure that one is published to YouTube as well. So if you think this looks awesome and you want to get a good little lesson, it's like 30 minutes on how to do wireframing and design with Figma in Tableau. I strongly recommend it. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Send that link over and I'll make sure to share it with our LinkedIn group. Awesome. Does anyone else have any more questions? Yep. Yeah, so you're talking, so the question was, is that an example? Sam, the question was, is that a technique individuals can use to sort of make a dashboard pop? And
Yes.
so individuals will go to some sort of wireframe tool and they'll build some objects, you know, like a background, right? Basically, it was built as a template for his dashboard. He uses that, I'm assuming as I don't do it too often, but I'm assuming that's his image that he then puts on his dashboard, then he's just floating his worksheets on top of it. Yep.
That's how I do it. Is for the most part, I try and leverage dashboard containers, vertical and horizontal, as much as possible, and I'll get everything like pixel perfect that way, and then I'll actually just float that over the image. That's exactly how I do mine.
Gotcha.
We utilize Tableau Online most of our consumers or just viewers doing it through some browser. So with Figma, what I've found is that you have to use a lot of things exploding, and when going from the desktop to the Tableau Online, you can't really control how it shifts things around. So let's run into that, and what do you do to get around that while still being able to use, the
float.
visual feel that brings to your dashboards.
Yeah. What's your dashboard size?
The landscape standard is one of the.
Okay, so it's a fixed size.
Yeah, it's a fixed size.
So Sam, the question was, have you ever had any issues when you're implementing or you're using Figma on one of your dashboards, and then once you publish it to a server, whether it be Tableau Online, for instance, with things shifting around a little bit?
So I haven't. I know that some issues that some folks encounter is that when they drag the image onto their canvas, well, like for instance, what I've got here on the screen, if you can't see it, let me know. But like what I have here, like this is the exact same structure that I just described, where these are all a part of fixed containers floated on top of these things. So that's one thing that I would potentially look to do if you're not already doing that, because then that will ensure that it's pixel perfect if the image renders properly. Because if you're individually dropping each item onto there and then you're manually setting that, you're not using containers, I could see that potentially being a cause for why things aren't looking right. But like this, for instance, is a case study dummy dashboard that I built.
So yeah, real quick, while you're doing that, are you using containers or are you just floating everything?
Yeah.
I am. So
Sorry, Sam, I'm asking the audience, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You see that there? He has one vertical container that's floating on top of it. And so, but are you just floating your worksheet on top of it, or are you putting your objects in the vertical container? And then floating it? Okay. Yeah, I don't float objects too often just because I know they can shift. It looks like Sam has sort of perfected it to where he may not have, he may not experience what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I'm team float, so when I'm using Figma, I will make sure that the background is like whatever the dimensions of my background are, I set dashboard dimensions to that. And I have gotten much more familiar with the X and Y with the height in the dashboard, so that way I can sort of map because I run into that a little bit too. It's not even really consistent when it happens. It's sometimes online sites, sometimes it's ever so slightly, and Like I have the issue with one of my dashboards now where on the desktop, the fonts look really big, but online, they're tiny. So, yeah, we kind of play around with it. And that's about it. I don't know. Super.
Fonts are the whole reason why I started using Figma and why I started doing background images, because unless you're using a web safe font and you're publishing to anything outside of Tableau server where you can upload specific font files to your server machine, like you can't reliably trust that your font's going to render properly. So yeah, I am team tiled, Jared, except for when I'm using a background image. I'm team tiled up to the point where then I float that tile over the background exactly where I want it.
Very cool. Well, hey guys, Sam, we could probably talk for another 30 minutes. But hey, I did want to thank you for taking the time today to present. Great discussion here. I hope you guys, online, you guys here got a lot out of that, because I know I did. So Sam, are you going to be at conference?
I am going, I and my wife, who she's just learning Python and is not in data at all, she's attending too. So you'll get to meet my better half in Vegas in May. So I'm very much looking forward to going and meeting so many people in the data fam community. So.
Yes, so I will definitely be there. I'll make sure to try to find you. If you guys here or online are going to be there, please send us a note through LinkedIn and just say, hey, we're going to be there because, I'd like to hang out as much as possible.
Yeah. I will also be there, and since I'm still not exactly sure what's going to be happening in person, one of the things I was planning to do is some YouTube live sessions, some live interviews during the conference. So if there's anybody that's going to be there interested in participating, let me know so I can kind of get a rotating schedule to get those happening. Okay.
I would ask how big your budget is. Yeah, so if you guys are definitely, if you guys are going to the conference, please send us a note. Other than that, does anybody else have any questions online here?
A role posting.
Oh, okay. We do have a posting here. Let me give me 1 second.
A new BI position at the City of Plano IT department. There's a LinkedIn link to, I think, what would be the job.
Very cool. So what I will do, Reza, so one thing real quick, anyone, if no one here is not, if you're not a member yet of our LinkedIn group, it's the Real North Texas Tableau user group. Guys, please look it up on LinkedIn, ask to join. We're very quick to respond. Reza, if you are already a member, feel free to post this link there and say, hey, we have a job opening for City of Plano IT. If not, it's the real Tableau, what is it?
The Real North Texas.
The Real North Texas Tableau user group. And Reza, if you're not already a member, request to join and we'll accept it pretty quickly. Can't talk today. All right, well, if there's no more questions or no more announcements, I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and we will talk to you guys in early May. Thanks.
Thank you all for attending. If you want to follow me on social media, I'll send out this to the leadership team so that they can distribute this. If you want to connect with me, at Epley Samuel on Twitter, find me at Sam Epley on LinkedIn. We're looking forward to connecting with anyone who wants to talk, or if you've got any questions, please feel free to shoot them my way.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Big thanks.
Thank you.